Hey there. If you're here, you're probably the kind of person who loves to understand things, to really get to the bottom of like how things work. And you appreciate when someone can explain something complex, well, efficiently.
Oh,
So that's exactly what we're doing today. We're going to do a deep dive, a really thorough exploration of a way to approach life, to kind of navigate all the complexities and maybe, just maybe, experience a little less struggle along the way.
and the roadmap for this deep dive is a book called Mindfulness, an 8-week plan.
Right. And the thing that this book really nails is it kind of highlights this thing it feels like, especially in Western cultures. We're so focused on the pursuit of happiness. But it's almost like in that pursuit, we've kind of forgotten a more direct route to experiencing joy. We get in our own way, create obstacles to finding peace.
It's a bit paradoxical, isn't it? We strive for happiness, but the very ways we go about it can end up creating more stress, more anxiety.
Totally. And this book is not about, chasing some fleeting constant state of bliss. It's really about, I think, offering a practical set of tools, a way to step out of those cycles of anxiety and stress and unhappiness that can feel so, so relentless.
It's about recognizing that we don't have to be constantly caught in those cycles. There's a way to work with the mechanics of our minds rather than against them.
It's less about achieving some perfect state of happiness and more about understanding how to avoid unnecessary suffering.
And for someone like you who thrives on understanding, on really grasping the core of an idea, I think the insights in this book will be particularly resonant. We're going to delve into how our minds, fascinating as they are, can also be incredibly efficient at creating and sustaining these downward spirals of negativity. And then we're going to explore how mindfulness provides a surprisingly straightforward path to, well, first noticing those patterns and then learning to step back from them.
And we'll be drawing directly from the book, walking through the key explanations and examples. No need to go read it yourself. We've got you covered.
Consider us your guides through the terrain of the mind.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is crystal clear. We want to distill to extract that essential knowledge about how our minds work and how mindfulness offers a different way of interacting with our experiences, with the world around us. And we're going to do this in a way that, respects your time, respects your curiosity, and avoids getting bogged down in unnecessary fluff. Sound good?
Let's dive in.
Okay, let's do it. So the book starts by really looking at how these spirals of unhappiness, how they kind of grab hold. How do we go from just a normal fleeting feeling of sadness or frustration to something that feels so much bigger, so much more entrenched?
And one of the fascinating things the book highlights is just how quickly and efficiently these normal mood fluctuations can, well, amplify into prolonged negativity. There are certain thinking patterns, and the book does a brilliant job of laying these out, that act almost like catalysts. They take a momentary dip in mood and turn it into something, well, much stickier.
Yeah, it's like a domino effect. Like one little negative thought can be the first domino, and then boom, this whole cascade starts. The book gives this great example, and it's so relatable, where, you're having just a regular moment of sadness. Maybe you're feeling a bit down,
Yeah.
but then that triggers this whole chain reaction. You start recalling other unhappy memories. Those memories stir up more negative emotions, and then comes the really sharp stuff, the self-criticism, the what is wrong with me kind of thoughts. It's almost like we have this built-in system for making ourselves feel worse.
It's remarkably efficient, isn't it? And the book calls these self-attacking thoughts, which I think is such an apt description because they really do feel like attacks. And what's really interesting is how sticky these thoughts are. Once they gain traction, it's incredibly difficult to just stop them. It's like one negative thought seamlessly feeds into the next, creating this sense of momentum that's hard to break.
Right. Like that initial, maybe small, sad thought
Hmm.
suddenly attracts this whole network of other similar negative experiences. And before you know it, it feels like you're drowning in sadness.
And the book uses this really clever analogy, drawing on research with deep sea divers, to explain how context shapes our memory.
Oh, tell me about that. I remember reading that. It was really interesting.
Yeah. So researchers found that divers who learned a list of words on the beach were able to recall those words more easily when they were back on the beach. And the divers who learned the words underwater, well, they remembered best when they were underwater again. The environment acted as this powerful cue for retrieving the memories.
And that's such a brilliant way to understand how our own emotional states work, right?
Yeah.
Because when we're feeling sad, that sadness creates a mental environment, for lack of a better word, that makes those sad memories so much more accessible. It's not that the happy memories are gone. It's that our current emotional state makes the negative ones, well, they just pop to the surface much more easily.
Precisely. So understanding the self-reinforcing nature of these unhappiness spirals, I think that's the first really crucial insight. It reveals how our thought patterns and our emotional states can kind of get locked into these negative feedback loops. And that can lead to really prolonged periods of distress. So then naturally the question becomes, if this is something our minds tend to do, what's the alternative? What's the other way our minds can operate?
And that brings us to, I think, the core of the book, which is this concept of the two modes of mind, the doing mode versus the being mode.
No, the doing mode, that's something we're all very familiar with. It's that analytical part of our minds, the part that's constantly thinking, evaluating, planning. It sifts through our past experiences, trying to find solutions to problems. It's very much in go mode all the time.
Yeah, it's like our inner project manager, right? Always trying to optimize and figure things out.
Exactly. But what's really fascinating, and where the book offers a fresh perspective, is this contrast with the mind's capacity for awareness. It emphasizes that we are not just our thoughts. We're also capable of simply being aware that we are thinking. It's this subtle shift, but it has huge implications.
Right. It's that recognition that there's more to our experience than just this constant internal dialogue. There's also this ability to directly perceive the world through our senses, like the sounds around us, the smells, what we're seeing, all that sensory information coming in without needing our inner commentator to constantly interpret everything.
Exactly, and the book puts it really well. Thinking is not all there is to conscious experience. Our minds are capable of this much broader, more expansive kind of awareness than just the constant stream of thoughts.
So, okay, we have these two modes. How does this idea of awareness of the being mode, how does that connect to mindfulness, to the actual practice?
This is where it gets really interesting. Because mindfulness meditation is precisely about deliberately cultivating this other way of engaging with the world. It's about consciously shifting away from being stuck in that constant doing mode.
So instead of always trying to analyze, to fix, to figure things out, it's more about,
It's about becoming present, being back in touch with your senses, as the book puts it. It's about re-experiencing things with this fresh sense of curiosity, almost like you're encountering them for the first time.
like seeing the world through new eyes.
Exactly. And the book talks about cultivating a direct, intuitive sense of what is going on in your inner and outer worlds. It's not about intellectualizing, it's about directly experiencing the present moment without filters.
So it's not about emptying your mind, which is what a lot of people think meditation is. It's more about changing how you relate to your thoughts, to your experience.
Yes, and a really key understanding here is that mindfulness teaches us that thoughts are just thoughts. They are events in the mind. They're not facts. They're not necessarily true statements about you, and they certainly don't always accurately reflect reality.
Which is a huge freeing realization, right?
Yeah.
To understand that you don't have to believe everything you think. You don't have to instantly react to every single thought that pops into your head. So how does this new way of relating to our thoughts, how does that help us break free from those negative patterns that we were talking about before, the ones that can make us so unhappy?
Well, this is where the limitations of the doing mode, particularly when it comes to dealing with internal states, become really clear. The book explains that when we're in doing mode, our approach to problem solving often involves focusing not only on our goals, on what we want to achieve, but also on the things we want to avoid, the anti-goals.
Okay, that makes sense in a lot of situations. Like
Yeah.
if you're planning a road, you want to avoid traffic, right? So
Sure.
you focus on the roads you don't want to take. But how does that apply to our internal world, to our feelings?
The book argues that this same strategy can actually backfire when we try to apply it to unwanted internal experiences. So for example, let's say you're feeling really tired and stressed. If your main strategy is to constantly focus on not being exhausted, on preventing burnout at all costs, you're inadvertently keeping those very anti-goals, those things you don't want to feel, front and center in your awareness. And paradoxically, this can actually amplify the anxiety and stress, pushing you closer to the very state you're trying so hard to avoid.
Oh, I see. So it's like that classic example of trying not to think about a pink elephant. The harder you try not to think about it, the more that pink elephant just pops into your mind. So what's the mindful approach then? What's the alternative to this constant struggle?
The book introduces the concept of mindful acceptance. And it's really important to understand that this isn't about passively resigning yourself to negative situations or emotions. It's not about giving up or saying, oh, well, this is just how it is. It's more about coming to your senses, as the book describes it. It's about experiencing the present moment with a sense of calmness and without immediately judging whatever arises.
So it's about acknowledging whatever you're feeling, whether it's a thought, a physical sensation, an emotion. without trying to push it away or change it right away.
Exactly. And this mindful acceptance gives you a crucial element of perspective. By not getting completely caught up in the struggle of trying to avoid those unwanted feelings, you create some space. You gain the clarity to see what's really important in this moment. Now, the book also mentions these habit releasers, which are, well, they sound like pretty small intentional actions designed to kind of shake up our routines a bit. Can you talk a little about how those work?
Oh yeah, those are interesting. They're almost like little experiments.
They are. They're these simple actions that you do consciously with the intention of disrupting those automatic patterns of behavior and thought that we all have. The idea is to kind of reawaken that innate curiosity that we all have to bring us back to the present moment.
So what are some examples of these habit releasers?
Well, the book gives some really simple ones, like intentionally choosing to sit in a different chair during a meeting you always attend. Or maybe you decide to turn off the television at a different time than usual. Or you could even choose a different route for your commute. Anything that breaks up those ingrained
So
patterns.
it's about adding a little bit of novelty, a bit of conscious choice into our routines.
Exactly. And the book suggests that these small disruptions, when combined with a regular mindfulness practice, can really help us to experience life with more freshness, more presence. Now, the book also gets into the science behind mindfulness, which I think is super fascinating. There's a whole section on how mindfulness can actually create changes in the brain.
I love that part. It's not just some woo-woo feeling. It's like there's actual neurological stuff happening.
Right. And the book highlights the work of Dr. Sarah Lazar, who's a neuroscientist. And her research, using brain imaging, showed that people who practice meditation consistently actually have measurable changes in their brain structure. It's not just a subjective feeling of calmness, there are real physical alterations happening.
That's wild. So what kind of changes are we talking about?
Well, one way the book explains it is that meditation can actually recalibrate the brain's emotional thermostat, so to speak. So over time, that can lead to a more stable baseline of happiness. You become less reactive to those dips in mood, less susceptible to things like anger, anxiety, fatigue, even apathy. And a really key area of the brain involved in all this is called the insula.
The insula. Okay, remind me, what does that do again?
So the insula is this part of the brain that's really important for interoception, which is basically our awareness of our own internal bodily states. So like noticing your heartbeat, feeling your breath, being aware of whether you're hungry or full, all that kind of stuff. And the insula also plays a big role in empathy and social connection. And what's really cool is that studies have shown that people who meditate regularly actually show increased activity and even structural growth in the insula.
So by practicing mindfulness, we're not only becoming more aware of what's happening inside our own bodies, but we're also potentially strengthening our ability to connect with and understand other people.
Exactly. And the book talks about how empathy, that ability to really understand someone else's experience from the inside out, is the foundation of compassion and loving kindness. And what's really encouraging is that research has shown that even a relatively short period of mindfulness training, like around 8 weeks, can start to produce noticeable changes in how the insula functions.
That's really promising. It suggests that even if you don't meditate for years and years, you could still reap some pretty significant benefits, even at the neurological level.
Ah,
Okay, I want to talk about another concept that the book brings up, this idea of the automatic pilot, which I think is something we can all relate to, right? Like going through the motions, doing things without really thinking about them.
oh, absolutely. The automatic pilot basically describes how our habits, all those ingrained patterns of behavior, can take over. We end up doing things without conscious awareness. And the book gives this example of someone who intends to go upstairs to change clothes for a party, but then their mind gets caught up in thinking about work, and they totally lose track of their original goal. They just end up wandering around the house, lost in thought.
Yeah, I've totally done that.
Right.
Or, you walk into a room and you can't remember why you went in there. It's like
Mm.
our mind is just off doing its own thing. The book also mentions that really interesting study by Daniel Simons, where people were so focused on giving directions that they completely failed to notice that the person they were talking to had switched places with someone else.
Right. It's a great illustration of how much we can miss when we're on autopilot. And what's interesting from a cognitive science perspective is that this automatic processing, it does have some benefits. It allows us to free up our limited working memory because we can kind of offload all these routine tasks to these habitual patterns. A lot of our daily activities are really complex, but through habit, our brains can basically link all the necessary actions together without us having to consciously think about every single step.
Like driving a car
Where
or riding a bike. At first, it takes so much concentration, but eventually it becomes almost effortless.
Exactly. But while this automaticity can be super efficient, it can also have some downsides, especially when it comes to our intentions and our awareness of the present moment. The book gives this example of sitting down to write a single email, but then getting sucked into responding to all these other messages and ending up with even more work than you started with. You get distracted from your original intention.
So it's not that habits are bad. It's more about being aware of when we're being run by them, right? Mindfulness is about having more conscious control.
Exactly. It's not about eliminating habits, but about having more choice in how we engage with them. And one practice that the book introduces to help us step out of this automatic pilot mode is called the raisin meditation.
The raisin meditation. Okay, what's that all about?
It sounds a little strange, but it's actually a very simple and powerful exercise. It involves taking a single raisin and really paying attention to every single detail of it. Like you look at its texture, you feel it in your fingertips, you smell it, and then you slowly put it in your mouth and just notice all the subtle sensations as you chew it.
So it's about really slowing down and engaging with something we normally do without even thinking about it.
Exactly. It's about bringing that mindful awareness to even the most ordinary experiences. And it helps us to kind of wake up and realize just how much richness and detail there is in the present moment if we just take the time to notice it. Now, one of the challenges that people often encounter when they start practicing mindfulness is the experience of a wandering mind. And the book addresses this head on.
Right. Our minds are thought-generating machines. It's what they do. I think a lot of people get discouraged when they try to meditate and they just think, oh, I'm doing it wrong because I can't stop thinking.
The book talks about how, in the beginning, that was Hannah's experience. She was really distressed by how busy her mind was during meditation. She thought that the goal was to completely silence her thoughts, and when that didn't happen, she just got more and more frustrated.
Yeah, it's like trying to hold back the tide.
Exactly. But then she had this really crucial shift in perspective. She started to see her thoughts and feelings less as intruders and more like, well, the book uses the analogy of a passing weather pattern. Like, sometimes there are storms, sometimes it's calm and sunny, but you don't try to control the weather, right? You just observe it. Or the book also compares the mind to the surface of a lake. Sometimes it's calm, sometimes it's choppy, but underneath there's this stillness.
And that's a profound realization, right? To understand that you can't always control the thoughts that come up, but you can control how you relate to them. You can learn not to get so swept away by every thought. Now, the book also talks about this connection between our mental and physical states, especially when it comes to mood, like how our posture and the way we move can actually affect how we feel.
Right. It mentions some research by Johannes Mikulak, who found that people who are depressed often have very distinctive patterns in the way they walk. They tend to walk more slowly, with less arm swing, and their posture is more slumped over. And the interesting thing is, posture isn't just a result of mood. It can actually influence our mood. Like, the book encourages you to try this little experiment. Just spend a minute sitting in a slumped posture and notice how you feel. Then sit upright and see if there's a shift in your internal state.
I remember doing that. It's pretty amazing how quickly it can shift your mood, just changing your posture.
Mm-hmm.
And the book also talks about the fight or flight response and how
Wow.
our brains don't always distinguish between real physical threats and internal psychological stressors.
Exactly. So whether it's a dangerous situation in your environment or it's a scary memory or worry about the future, your brain can trigger the same physiological stress response. That's where that feeling of tension comes from. And then here's the thing. Your mind can interpret that physical tension as further evidence that there's a threat, which just perpetuates the cycle of stress and anxiety.
So even something relatively small, emotionally, especially if you're already kind of stressed, can kickstart this whole cascade of physical and mental reactions. It's like a snowball effect.
Precisely. And that's where this tool that the book introduces, the 3-minute breathing space, comes in really handy. It's basically a little mini meditation that you can do to kind of interrupt that cycle, to reset.
The 3-minute breathing space. Okay, I love the name. Tell me more about it.
It's designed to be really short and easy to fit into your day. The book talks about how it's helpful when you're feeling overwhelmed or angry or stressed out.
So like a quick antidote to those spiraling negative feelings.
Exactly. And the book points out that it has two main benefits. First, it acts as a regular pause button throughout your day, helping you to stay more mindful. And second, it can be used as an emergency meditation, like a first aid kit for your mind when you're feeling really pressured.
Okay, so how does it work? What do you actually do during these 3 minutes?
It's really simple. The first step is just acknowledging whatever thoughts, feelings, and body sensations are present in that moment without judgment. Then you gently shift your attention to the physical sensations of your breath. And finally, You expand your awareness to your whole body, just noticing any sensations that are present.
It sounds so straightforward, but I bet it's really effective. Like just taking a few minutes to ground yourself and come back to the present moment.
Hmm.
Okay, shifting gears a little bit, the book also has this really intriguing section about how we should think of our thoughts as rumors.
Yes, I love that analogy.
Yeah, tell me more about that. What's the significance of thinking of our thoughts as rumors?
Well, the book explains that just like rumors, our thoughts may or may not have any basis in reality. They pop into our minds, and while some of them might reflect actual facts or useful information, others can be totally speculative, biased, or just plain distorted.
And we often just accept them as truth without questioning them.
Exactly. And the book makes this really important point that when we try to combat negative self-criticism, a lot of times our first instinct is to try to reason with those thoughts, to try to dismiss them as irrational. But that often fails because those thoughts are so emotionally charged.
Oh, totally. It's like your emotions can just override your logic.
Exactly. And the book gives some examples of common negative thought patterns that can really fuel stress, unhappiness, and exhaustion. Things like, I must never fail, or what's wrong with me? Those kinds of really harsh self-judgments. And the key insight here is that these thoughts are often symptoms of underlying stress, not necessarily objective truths.
So when you notice yourself having those thoughts, it can be helpful to remember that they might not be telling you the whole story. They might just be a reflection of how stressed you are.
Exactly. And that awareness, that ability to step back and see those thoughts as just thoughts, not facts, gives you so much more freedom in how you respond to them. You're not so automatically hooked by them. And this leads us to this idea of turning toward difficulties, which the book illustrates beautifully through Alana Rosenbaum's story.
Oh yeah, Alana. She was the mindfulness teacher who was dealing with cancer, right?
Yes. And she was actually teaching a mindfulness course at the same time that her cancer occurred. And her experience really highlights that acceptance in the context of mindfulness is not about passivity or resignation. It's not about giving up.
So it's not about saying, oh, well, I have cancer. There's nothing I can do about it, so I'm just going to lie down and let it happen.
Exactly. It's more about acknowledging the reality of the situation, but doing so with compassion, without resistance. It's about saying, okay, this is what is happening right now, but without adding on a layer of judgment or struggle.
And to help people practice this kind of acceptance, the book introduces the exploring difficulty meditation. Can you talk a bit about how that works?
So in this meditation, you basically bring to mind something that's difficult for you, something that's causing you stress or pain. And instead of trying to push it away or fix it, you just gently observe your body's physical responses to that thought or situation. You do it with this sense of curiosity and compassion, like you're exploring uncharted territory. And the book gives this great example of a guy named Harry who, at first, he didn't feel anything. But then as he brought this difficult work situation to mind, he noticed this really distinct tightening in his chest. He hadn't even been aware of it before.
So it's about bringing awareness to those subtle physical sensations that we often don't even realize we're having.
Mhm.
And the book also delves into the impact of the past on our present experience, particularly through something called overgeneral memory. I found that really fascinating.
Me too. It's really common. And the book uses Kate's story to illustrate this. Kate was struggling with a lot of guilt, and she kept replaying this car accident in her mind, even though her niece, who was in the car, was totally unharmed. But Kate couldn't stop thinking about what could have happened, and this led to PTSD and depression. She just felt trapped in this loop of what ifs.
It's like her mind was stuck in the past.
Exactly. And that's where this concept of overgeneral memory comes in. So instead of being able to remember specific events and details from the past, the way we retrieve those memories gets kind of truncated, simplified. It stops at this more general summary. So, for example, instead of Kate remembering a specific argument she had with her mom last Tuesday, her memory would just be arguments with my mom, without any specific details.
So it's like instead of remembering the individual trees, she's just remembering forest.
Yes, a great analogy. And research has shown that this overgeneral memory is more common in people who are tired, depressed, or have experienced trauma. And it's linked to having trouble letting go of the past and being more easily overwhelmed by difficult situations in the present.
So it's like Because the memories are so general, they feel bigger and scarier, and it's harder to see them as just isolated events.
Exactly. And the great news is that mindfulness training can actually help to shift this pattern. Studies have shown that mindfulness can make memories more specific, less overgeneral, which can be incredibly freeing because it allows you to disentangle yourself from the past. You're not so weighed down by it. Now, speaking of freeing ourselves from the past and from negative patterns, the book emphasizes this idea of cultivating kindness, especially kindness towards ourselves.
Yeah, that's so crucial. I think we're often our own worst critics.
Absolutely. The book really emphasizes that treating ourselves with the same compassion and understanding that we would offer a friend and learning to stop that harsh self-judgment are absolutely essential for finding inner peace.
It even asks these really pointed questions like, do you criticize yourself for having emotions that you think are irrational? Or do you beat yourself up for not feeling differently than you do?
Those are great questions because it's so easy to fall into those patterns of self-criticism without even realizing it. And one practice that the book introduces to help counteract that negativity is called the befriending meditation, also known as loving kindness meditation.
The befriending meditation. I love that. Tell me more about how that works.
So, in this practice, you basically gently repeat phrases to yourself that express goodwill. Things like, may I be free from suffering, may I be happy, may I be healthy. And you can direct these phrases towards yourself, or you can extend them outwards to other people. You can visualize the person you're sending these phrases to, and just notice any emotional reactions that come up without judgment.
It sounds like a really powerful way to cultivate a sense of warmth and compassion, both for yourself and for others. Okay, before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more concept from the book that I think is really important, the exhaustion funnel.
Ah, yes, the exhaustion funnel. The book illustrates this so well with Marissa's story. Marissa was this woman who, over time, she gradually started giving up all the things that brought her joy and replenished her energy. Like, she stopped singing in her choir, she stopped going to her book club, she was spending less time with her daughter, she even stopped making time to cook healthy meals.
Because she's so busy with work,
Yeah.
right? It's like when we get stressed and overwhelmed, we think, okay, I've got to cut something out, and it's usually the things that are actually good for us.
It's so common. It seems logical in the moment, like those things are expendable luxuries. But what Marissa's story shows is that when you neglect those nourishing parts of your life for too long, it can actually backfire. You end up with less energy, less creativity. You might even become less efficient at work. It just makes the whole situation worse.
And it can be so subtle the way it happens. It's like you don't even realize you're sliding down that funnel until you're already exhausted and burnt out.
The book gives some really helpful warning signs to look out for. Things like increased irritability, withdrawing from social events, letting those basic self-care tasks slide, having trouble sleeping, or changes in your appetite. It's good to do a little self-check every now and then to make sure you're not heading down that path.
Totally. Okay, so what's the antidote to the exhaustion funnel? How do we climb back out?
Well, the book emphasizes the importance of consciously identifying those things in your life that bring you joy and give you energy, and then making sure you're making time for them, even if it's just small chunks of time. It's about actively balancing those nourishing activities with the things that inevitably deplete us.
Like maybe instead of scrolling through social media for an hour before bed, you could read a chapter of a book that you actually enjoy.
Exactly. Or maybe you could take a 15-minute walk in nature during your lunch break instead of eating at your desk. Small changes can make a big difference. And the book ends by really driving home this message that mindfulness isn't just a set of techniques that you use when you're stressed. It's more like a fundamental shift in how you approach your whole life.
Right? It's a way of being.
Yeah.
And the book has this great story about a king who wanted to move his palace because he was always feeling overwhelmed. He thought, if I can just find the perfect spot, the perfect place, then everything will be finished and I'll finally have peace. But of course, there's no such thing as a place where all your tasks are magically done, right? Life is just this constant unfolding.
Exactly. And mindfulness is about realizing that this moment right now is all we really have. It's about waking up to the life we're already living, instead of constantly putting it off for some imaginary future point where we think we'll finally be happy.
Yeah. And the book talks about how week 8 of the program isn't the end goal. It's really just the beginning. It's about integrating these practices into your daily life so they become sustainable. And it uses this great analogy of mindfulness being like an emergency parachute.
And just like a parachute, you have to take the time to pack it carefully and make sure it's in good working order. You can't just expect it to magically appear when you need it.
So it's not enough to just learn about mindfulness. You have to actually practice it regularly to really reap the benefits. And the book gives some really practical tips for doing that, like starting your day with a few mindful breaths, using those 3-minute breathing spaces throughout the day, and trying to maintain some kind of formal practice, even if it's just for a minute or two each day.
Even small, consistent efforts can make a huge difference over time.
So to kind of sum it all up, the book's main message is that mindfulness is a really powerful and accessible way to understand how your mind works, and it can help you to engage with life more fully in this present moment. And like the book emphasizes, the best way to really understand the benefits of mindfulness is to experience it for yourself, to actually try it out.
Absolutely. Knowledge is important, but it's the direct experience that's truly transformative.
So we encourage you to keep exploring these concepts, maybe even check out the book Mindfulness, an 8-week plan for yourself. It's a great guide. And as a final thought to leave you with, we'd love for you to consider what's one small intentional shift in your awareness that you can make today to bring a new perspective to.